quite often all you see. Of a male lion in the bush when you're walking. Obviously with the benefit of a zoom it's a lot easier to see him, but as you saw from that would be our angle. We're no more than 25 feet from that lion, and you can see there's lots of open space there. Definitely got to keep your eyes peeled in the bush. Anyway, okay, the message just on the radio, everybody, so if you hear me speaking to a third person, I got a bit distracted with trying to see what tracks are over here on the road, and I missed out finishing what I was going to say. There's an access road here, and one of the guests that arrived late last night to one of the camps said that they saw two leopards crossing over the road in close to this area, and which moved into our part of the reserve, into Djuma. Go and see where those are first, see which direction they're going in, and then see if we can put effort into finding them. I think it would be a worthwhile exercise. Two, it could be a mother and cub, or it could be mating.
Guys, welcome back. I apologize for our signal issues. We were just struggling a little bit there with Steph, and I'm just back where I last saw those female leopard tracks heading straight towards the buffalo carcass that the Nkuhumas apparently finished off last night. So I just want to have a look, poke my nose into this block, see where she's gone. Tracks come off along here. A steep hill. We will fairly slowly. Dust clouds. Up we go. So the buffalo carcass was somewhere in this block that the Nkuhumas got. Let's see if we can follow through here, find out where she's gone. You can see the tracks of the vehicle coming through here.
There it is.
There we go. So she must have come and had a sniff here. Well spotted, Andrew. So there we go. Very, very young buffalo, so not much meat for 7 hungry lions. Looks to be just under a year old, just a couple of months old. Just going to hop out and have a look, see if that leopard came to have a sniff around here. So the tracks of this leopard came straight towards the buffalo carcass, but I'm surprised they didn't stop to have a look and maybe have a bit of a snack. Maybe she did. See the lion tracks coming through. And they've devoured this pretty much completely already. There's nothing left, and obviously the Nkuhumas not too keen on sticking around close to the Birmingham boys. They ate quickly and then moved on. And leopard did come and have a look, had a sniff, maybe even had a nibble, but then moved on. And I think maybe we might be looking at Shadow's tracks. Looks to be about the right size. I'm sort of starting to get to know the leopard tracks and sort of how big they are. It's definitely a female. Very possibly Shadow's come through. She might have headed off, she's headed off sort of in this direction. She might have gone to fetch Sindile or just head across and check up on him. So we're gonna leave this buffalo carcass. There's not much meat, although there's plenty left for scavenging hyenas. And let's see if we can loop around and see where she's gone. She did come and have a sniff. Her tracks come through on this game path and then carried on. So not too sure where she's gone. There's lots of lion tracks as well, which makes life a little bit confusing. But it looks like she goes off in that direction. So let's see if we can follow up on her. Pick my way through the monkey orange. And with a carcass like that, it probably took the Nkuhumas less than half an hour to devour that, especially if they were feeling particularly hungry after all of their tension regarding the run-ins with the Birmingham boys and the fact that they lost their buffalo carcass to them. So they were probably finished and through that very, very quickly. And then the leopard came through shortly afterwards and had a bit of a sniff around. The tracks are on top of all of their tracks. Oh, there's a bit of a river through there. Now we've got to make our way back down that little hill that we climbed up. Although I actually think it might be easier to go this way. Slightly less of a dip. So she was probably resting up or moving through that block across here and heard all of the commotion. There was a very, very large herd of buffalo that moved through. She probably heard the kill and waited until the Nkuhumas were finished up and she knew that they'd moved off, and then came to investigate what was happening. Unfortunately, she probably discovered that there was not much meat left there. So I think that this female leopard who came to sniff around at the buffalo carcass would have been more than capable of claiming that carcass as her own and hoisting it into a tree. But as I said, there's not that much meat left on it, and definitely nothing left of the good stuff. But a leopard like Shadow could definitely have pulled it up into a tree. It is, as I said, a very, very young buffalo. She probably just decided that it wasn't worth the effort. There's not much meat left. And possibly if it is Shadow, bless you, Andrew.
Thank you.
If it was Shadow, she might have been more anxious to get back to wherever she's hidden Sindile. Especially with apparently the Anderson male moving around in that area. She's probably trying to keep quite a close eye on him. And we had a look briefly at that buffalo carcass, and it, as I said, it is young. And the reason that I said that is just looking at the size of the horns. They tend to grow fairly early on. They start to get their horns growing up from the growth points at 2 to 3 months of age. They start to come through as little bumps. but by a year old they have started to develop that slight curve that the horns have, and in that case I think that one was just under a year old, possibly somewhere around the 10-month mark. It's a guess, but I'm just working off my observations of horn growth in young buffalo. And for a leopard to take down a buffalo is not unheard of, but they typically will be very, very cautious, especially with breeding herds. Breeding herds can be exceptionally dangerous enemies to take on. And it's one thing if you are a 100 to 200 kilogram lion, but a slightly smaller leopard faced with a buffalo herd, and buffalo are known to very, very firmly defend their young. So, although some of the larger male leopards have been known to sort of catch the calves on the outskirts of a herd, it is a very risky business for a leopard, and typically they'll tend to avoid it. And that makes absolute sense. For a big pride of lions, it's worth the risk because you've got lots and lots of mouths to feed, and there are large animals that have very high energy requirements. So it's worth the risk of taking down a buffalo, especially when you've got, as the Nkahunas have got, a nice big young male like Junior to help you take them down. But for leopards, it makes far more sense for them to target slightly smaller prey that is less dangerous, because it's only one mouth or possibly two or three if the female has cubs. It's only a couple of mouths to feed, and you don't, in this kind of environment, want to risk any sort of injury to yourself or to your cubs. So generally, leopards tend to target smaller prey. The females will go for the small animals, typically steenbok and duiker, and the larger males will then start aiming for things like kudu. But even a big kudu is quite a risk for a male leopard. It has to be a very big male leopard, sort of the size of one of our big males like Tingana, the Anderson male, or Mbula, to really ensure that they are safe. But that being said, leopards don't always play by the rules either, and there are reports of male leopards taking down even baby giraffe. So they are incredibly effective and powerful hunters, even for their size. They're slightly smaller build than the lions. And I've even seen two male cheetah who are much less stocky, much more fragile looking. I've seen them take down a large kudu bull, which was incredibly impressive to watch, because that kudu probably had at least 100 kilograms over the combined weight of both of those cheetah, and they just use their sheer momentum from their speed to knock it over and take its legs out from under it. Very windy today. Perfect hunting weather for all of the predators. Interesting with leopards as well is that some are much more amenable to the idea of scavenging than others, and I think that is just a character thing more than anything else. Obviously a very, very hungry leopard will take whatever it can get, but there are certain leopards in different areas that tend to scavenge a lot more readily than others. Whereas something like a cheetah will almost never scavenge an old kill. They typically want fresh meat, they'll eat their kill, they won't even stay by it for longer than a day. And that's partly an adaptation to being much smaller than most of the other predators in this area. So they need to feed and then get out of the area so that they're not in any danger. One of my favorite open areas of this reserve. It's nice to see these big natural clearings, and this is perfect hunting ground for something like a cheetah. It's just that right balance of cover so they can sneak up on their prey, and then open spaces so that they can get up to their top speed. Stop to have a look at these female kudu. The one got a little bit of a fright as we came in, but this other female is quite relaxed. And on days like today, we'll find that lots of the prey animals are very, very alert. This one seems quite comfortable. She's just nibbling on some bush willow. And kudu are typically almost entirely browsing based, but I have seen them eat grass before, which goes to show you should never ever put on a general rule for any animal. Oh, just stretching up there. What we'll see with all of the prey species at the moment, we've got some others moving in across to the left, but they're all going to be feeding straight into the wind, so they will move into the wind, and that's partly because they want to make sure that they smell any incoming threats, and they move into it so they hear or smell. Otherwise they're going to get caught very much by surprise if they feed against the wind, because then something can sneak up on them from the front, but also because of the tannins that are released by the plants as part of a defense mechanism. So when plants are fed on, they release these tannin-like molecules that actually make the leaves taste rather unpleasant. And not only does the tree that's being fed on release it, but it will blow across and stimulate the production in other plants as well. So they feed into the wind to make sure that the other tannins aren't affecting the trees that they are going to go and feed on. I have counted 7 crossing. This is now the 8th. You can see how very much on alert they all are. They are feeling pretty skittish, which is common on windy days like this. But definitely one of the most beautiful and graceful antelopes out here. and those long legs are unbelievably powerful. I've seen a kudu jump a 6-foot fence from a standing start before without even a run-up. They are incredible jumpers, but they are not built for long stamina runs, and that's part of an adaptation to the environment that they live in. Here comes the 9th. So they are better adapted to short bursts of speed and hiding in sort of thick vegetation and escaping predators that way. Not sure what this one's got on her neck there. She's got sort of mists of discoloration spots. I'm not sure if it's flecks of mud or possibly just she's got a genetic coloration there. And heading off out of the open area, which generally tends to make them fairly uncomfortable, and into some thicker, safer bush. And just while we are here, Kimberly, you were wondering what it is that we have on the dashboard, or at least sitting on top of my monitor here. And the answer to that is I've decided this is my new mascot. Might be a little bit macabre, but this is a jackal skull that we think was the jackal that was killed by the female leopard. I think it was with Scott, and it was a side-striped jackal, and it was a sighting that Scott had where the leopard killed it in whilst live. And you can see, I mean, there's not much left of it. We'll just have a look at it because they do have such impressive canines, and it wasn't actually something I'd realized until we got to have a look at the skull. It took us a little while to figure out what it was. We had to sort of look up a dentition and all of those things, but it is definitely a little jackal skull. Very, very tiny. I mean, if I put my hand here, you can see it's a very, very small skull. But yesterday it brought us plenty of luck in terms of viewing, so I think I shall keep it around for now. Just pop it back on my monitor. There we go. It's safely secured in there. And we shall carry on with our female leopard search. I'm not so happy to see the flies back again. They're definitely out in full force. And I think that's largely due to that very large buffalo herd that moved through the area yesterday. So we have them to thank for the flies. And although I always rejoice at the coming of summer, I could do without the flies. And at the moment we do have a sort of rather skeleton staff right now. We've got Andrew and Brian on camera and just Steph and myself presenting. So a lot of people are out and about throughout South Africa on leave or doing other things. And Jill, you were wondering if I'm enjoying the peace and quiet with the boys gone. Yes, most definitely. It is certainly more peaceful. However, I must say that I'm sure I'm not alone in that we miss their hilarious antics, and certainly James's amazing guitar. Every now and again we get treated to that whilst he's sitting around the table or around the fire. So yes, nice to have a little bit of a break, but I certainly think that we all miss them and we will be happy to have them back. And we haven't got too long to go before Scott and Nikki are back, as well as James and Brent. And I think, what day is it today? Is it Wednesday?
Thursday, I think.
Is it Thursday?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so I never know what day of the week it is. It's quite a challenge for me. It's just one of those things that I don't really need to know until I go back to the city. But Liam is back tomorrow in that case, I think. Either tomorrow or Saturday. So we'll be looking forward to having Liam back, the wildebeest back. And then we'll have a full or close to full complement of staff sometime next week. However, just as they all get back, I will be off on leave and back home to visit my parents and my little brother. I'm just going to head across to the zebra. There was a little bit of a show going on just as I drove up. I just want to see if hopefully they stick around and we can have a look at what they're doing. They seem to be in high spirits. Going to stop here so that I don't disturb them in any way. I just want to see if they carry on with their antics. There's a little bit of flicking and bucking, so let's see if they carry on. And zebra dynamics are always interesting to watch. You can see there's a little bit of tension in the air. And their ears are both still up, so it's not too serious. Typically when you get a really serious zebra fight, their ears lie flat against the back of their neck, and that's a real sign of aggression. This might be just a little spat or even a bit of play. And you'll see this typical behavior in all animals when they move out into the open, and that applies across the board. When they move out from an area of fairly thick bush into a clearing, they'll stop and stare for quite a while just to make sure that it is safe, because they know that there's less cover for them. So one intrepid stallion has moved off, and this group are still sniping at each other. I haven't had a chance to see them from behind, so I'm not sure if this is a breeding herd or a bachelor herd. Oh, spooked. And I think this could well be a young bachelor herd. There's at least 2 males. The one on the right is made it slightly easier to identify him. And this sort of behavior can be quite typical of young stallion herds that are just establishing and practicing their dominance. Yes, that's also a male. So a young group of stallions banding together in a bachelor herd and practicing the skills that they will need later in life. And you can see even now how wonderfully effective those stripe patterns are when they group together like that in terms of trying to identify individual animals. They seem to blend into one another, and you can imagine how that effect would be increased 10 times if your vision was sort of in black and white, as predators would be. There is just plenty of testosterone flying around at the moment. So these young boys, they'll stay together until they reach 4 years old or a little bit older, and they can start really competing with other males to acquire their own harem, so their own group of females. There's a sort of combination of affection, a bit like teenage boys play fighting. And serious zebra fights, if they do happen, can actually be fairly deadly. But at the moment this is just playing, establishing their own position in the little bachelor group hierarchy. I'm just listening, and so are they, to a wildebeest alarm calling, or possibly announcing his territory in the area, because the zebra don't seem to be too stressed out about it. They're not responding too seriously to it. So it could be a wildebeest that was calling just to mark out territory. So when a young zebra male reaches sort of, I think, around 1.5 to 2 years old, the stallion and his father of the herd that he is born into will start to put pressure on him to move out, as will the females, in fact. And he will then head out on his own. He will be sexually mature, but not large enough or experienced enough to start competing for his own harem. And then over the next few years, he'll develop his skills in the same way that these boys are now, just through play fighting. And once they reach a large enough size, which sort of happens around 4 years old, but it can be a little bit later as well, they will start to move out on their own and try and compete with other stallions in the area who do have harems. And you can see there's also a breeding herd at the back that's coming through. There will be some females. There's a little fairly young zebra foal at the back. Not too young, you can see it's lost most of its fluffiness. That's very typical of baby zebras. It's reaching sort of sub-adult age, probably about 9 or 10 months old. And if it is a female, she will stay with her herd until another roaming stallion comes and defeats her father in conflict, and then she will be passed on to that stallion to form part of a new breeding herd and a new harem. Here we've got groups of females. So another fairly young sub-adult. So for the males, acquiring their own breeding herd is just a matter of reaching the size and experience necessary. And once he does reach that stage where he can compete with a stallion, it is actually quite a dangerous time. The fights between zebra can be very, very aggressive. and they will bite at each other and kick, and they have very, very powerful canines, that not canines, incisors, that you can see them putting to use here in their sparring, just nipping at each other's necks. And those bites can actually, if they are seriously meant, do quite considerable damage. And often when you see a zebra missing a tail, it's not because it's a lucky escape from a lion or a leopard. It is because another zebra has bitten them. And I'm going to try and shift position slightly so that we can stay with these two fighting. If I get too much closer, it will disrupt them and they'll stop what they're doing. I just want to move us out from, get a bit of a clearer view. Stop here so that we don't disrupt them, because the rest of the herd is coming in at quite high speed. And lots of tension and nerves happening with the zebra herd, and there's nothing serious as far as I can see in terms of a threat or a predator. They are just, the tensions are running high, especially because it is so windy. And there we can see that wildebeest that was calling a little bit earlier. Just a male trying to establish his territory, not alarm calling in any way. But zebra and a lot of herd animals, especially on a windy day, if one of them spooks ever so slightly at the slightest noise, they do tend to startle like that. Let's see if we can get a bit closer now that they've stopped. Very interesting and nice examples of a play fight. Find a nice clear view. They are unfortunately going to continue moving off into this block. So we're looking at all of these zebras and the bottoms look rather identical, but in fact every single zebra has a unique stripe pattern, much like a human fingerprint. And Colin from Johannesburg, I hope it is not too chilly there, although judging by the wind that we're getting it probably is a bit nippy. Colin would have liked to know if kudu's stripes are unique to them in the same way, and yes, they are. Kudu do have unique stripes to each individual, although what I have noticed with kudu and inyala is that sometimes you get these nice sort of Y-shaped stripes, slight sort of variations in the way that they're formed. And I have noticed in the camp that I used to live in, we used to watch inyala come through fairly frequently, and over the 2 years we got to identify them by their individual stripes. And we also got to watch them raise young babies to adulthood. And I definitely noticed a very strong link genetically between similarities in the stripe pattern. So although each one has a different stripe pattern, the offspring tend to have a similarity, similar sort of Y splits and little offshoots of those stripes, which I suppose makes complete sense in the same way that we inherit physical traits from our parents, although we still look different to them. We still have our own unique look. We do have genetic similarities. And zebra will be completely unique as well. The one sort of second from the right of the screen has got its ears flat back, and I think is still a little bit annoyed. I'm going to try and reposition because I think it's still, that male is still going to cause a little bit of tension, although they do seem to be moving off now. Lots and lots of play fighting action happening. A better view. I'm just going to stop here for a moment, let them relax. I don't want them to move away from us. There's that slightly ears back tilt that male is showing, and the way he's following close behind the other male. I think he is thinking about delivering a nip to the bottom. Are just disappearing off once again, constantly moving. So the dynamics here that are happening, there's probably one stallion in charge of this breeding herd that moved in behind the young males. I didn't actually see which one it was, but there will be one stallion, and this is his harem. And then this rest of the group of these young males are just sort of following behind, possibly even hoping to take a chance at competing for a female. And we've been seeing a lot of the play fighting between the males, but the females can actually be equally aggressive, especially when a male has acquired a new female to add to his harem. The older females tend to be fairly unwelcoming and often kick her and bite her for quite an extended period of time, and they just try and keep her in her place. And it's actually up to the stallion to protect her from the rest of his mares and to make sure that she stays with the group, because obviously if she's treated like that, her initial instinct is to leave, but he keeps her herded in with the rest of the females, and it can take months for the older females to start accepting a new acquisition to the group. And their hierarchy will work in that exact manner. So the first female that the male acquires will be his favorite. She will be the one who leads the group through the bush, and she will always be the highest ranking. And then the newly acquired mares will sort of assume their status beneath her. So fairly fascinating animals. They do have interesting group dynamics. They have shifted off into some thick bush, so I think we shall leave them for now, but they have been highly entertaining and very educational in terms of zebra dynamics. Just try and loop around because there is a road right next to this group. Let's see if we can get them. I think they are going to move off. So as our zebra disappear off into the bush and across the road into just north of our Arethusa boundary, Dory from Wisconsin, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. It's great to have you aboard with us. And you would like to know if all animals have territories that they protect or if it's just predators. This was actually a great sighting for us to talk a little bit about that, because we had two different animals who have a unique approach to territorial approaches. So the wildebeest that we heard calling, they are animals that will hold a territory. So the male will hold a nice territory. He'll try and get the best, and obviously for them that means good access to water and good grazing potential. So he will try and find and compete for and defend the best area of land, and then he works on the assumption that that will bring the females to him. Now the zebra kind of work in a different way. So they're not territorial, although they do have home ranges that they move around in, but the male will acquire his females, keep them with him, and then move through different areas. And then we did also briefly have some impala as well, and their approach is also a different one. So the males will only acquire a breeding herd during the breeding season, so end of May, beginning of June, and they will defend and keep those females together only for that time period. And then after that, all sort of territories or anything like that actually goes out of the window. They will have a home range that they prefer to be in, but they don't necessarily stay in a territory or defend a territory. They defend a group of females. So some animals do have territories. Typically it depends on males, females. It's different for each. The approach is different for each species. So for something like a rhino, the males will have territories. The females don't really care. They will move around and do as they wish. And the males will also tolerate subadult males who move through, especially if there's access to water, and even other dominant males, provided that those males don't show any territorial signs, so they don't urine spray or scrape their dung in any way while they're moving through that territory. Elephants, no territories at all, but they do sort of move around in home ranges, but that can change throughout the years, especially because they're such long-lived animals. What else have we got? Warthogs are not territorial, but they will have a home range. Something like a steenbok or a duiker, all of the dwarf antelope, will defend tiny, tiny little territories, and they'll defend it together as a pair. So the male will fight off other males, and the female will fight off other females. But if the male comes across a sort of lone female who's strayed into his territory, he won't fight her. He will just try and mate with her without his mate realizing what's going on. So a lot of different approaches to territorial markings and home ranges. And a territory is defined as an area that is actively defended and marked. A home range is just where the animal moves through. So slightly different, and it is not in any way defended. It's just where they spend their time. So I'm sure you've all been wondering how Steph's leopard tracking has been going. Unfortunately, he hasn't had no luck, but I'm sure he'd like to just fill you in on his experiences. So we're going to cross back across to him, and I'm going to see if I can be less blinded by the sun for a start, and then possibly follow up on these female leopard tracks. I'll be back with you a little bit later.
welcome back. We've been hot on the search for some leopard for you this morning. I know we were having a few signal gremlins when I lost you the last time, so I'm just going to give you an idea of why we are where we are. Last night on one of the main access roads, one of the guests coming into the camp said that they saw 2 leopards crossing into our property, crossing into Djuma. And I went this morning after we saw those male lions lying around to see if we could find them, and almost immediately we found some fresh male leopard tracks. So myself and 2 other rangers are in the area, combing through the area. I've already been on foot, following up on the male leopard tracks. He comes from this bush on our right hand side. His tracks come into this area over here, and I did see older tracks of a female leopard. So the story as I have it in my head at the moment is he was coming up this way, he met with the female that was already in this area. Together they were seen and together they are moving, because Andrew, one of the other rangers here, has got fresh tracks of both of them together. So that's the story as it's building in my mind, and now the trick is, how do we find these 2 animals? And that is easier said than done. So usually with male and female leopard together, it doesn't always mean that they're going to be mating with one another. It may mean that the male is joining with the female just to see where in her estrus cycle she is. They'll be together for a bit and then they'll move off again. But from what these tracks are telling us, it looks like they are together, so it's a good thing. So to find mating leopards, you really have to drive and stop and drive and stop and listen. They'll be mating, if they are mating, they'll be mating every 5 minutes to 15 minutes. And the hope is that you can switch off your car and get audio of one of these cats doing their thing. I'm just timing it right, that's it. So, for all of you that believe in wishing luck, wish us luck, cross your thumbs. Go stand underneath a 4-leaf clover or whatever we need to do. There are 2 leopards right here where we are somewhere, and we're hot on their trail. We're going to stop over here and we're going to listen for a bit, and while I'm doing that I'm going to be answering a question from Kay in Washington State. Does a melanistic or a black leopard stand a better or worse chance at survival out here? And is the trait a dominant trait or a recessive trait? Okay, I'd say that the least camouflage you are, the harder it would be for you to survive out here. And although a black leopard will definitely have an advantage at night time over a traditionally colored leopard, there definitely is better value to extend your hunting range throughout the day and the night, and I'd say then a traditional coloured leopard, or the leopard that we all know from photographs, would stand a better chance, and it's why we don't see as many black leopards here. You do, however, get black leopards in the more thicker bush areas or jungle areas as you approach the equator, and their black leopard, because they're hunting under a canopy, their black leopard do very well, and you see a lot more black leopard as adults there than you do here. As to your question on dominance, the dominant gene is the normal color gene. The black gene, or the melanistic gene, is a recessive gene. And so yes, a black leopard could absolutely have normal colored cubs, and usually does have normal colored cubs, but they will all carry the recessive black gene. So even with that recessive gene, you can have two parents that are normal colored that give birth to a black leopard as well. Now we're just listening. While we're listening, we are going to be doing a link back to Jamie. My signal on this particular area on this car is jumping a little bit, and rather than me doing a stuttered version of a game drive, we're going to send you back through to Jamie, and we'll keep you updated as we have more news.
So guys, welcome back, and we do apologize for some of the signal issues that Steph has been experiencing. I'm sure our tech geniuses are hard at work trying to find those gremlins. So still no sign of these leopard tracks coming out, and I'm starting to think that maybe she pulled a bit of a sneaky on me and carried on and then looped back to where she came from. She might have just popped out to investigate what all of the noise was about, and then looped back into where she came from. So I'm going to have to double check around that area as well. But for now, I'm just making doubly sure that she hasn't crossed into this area somewhere. All of a sudden the temperature has increased tremendously. Took me quite by surprise. I've been chilly right up until this exact moment, and now I'm too warm. And I know that Steph was chatting to you a little bit about melanistic leopards, and I'm desperate to find that new active hyena den site, because there was a little bit of controversy about whether or not that little hyena cub, the young one, is in fact an example of a melanistic hyena. So with the time period that has passed since we last saw it, there's a good chance that if it's developing spots, we would have seen them. So I'm keen to see if we can relocate that active hyena den. We have been trying, no luck yet, but if we could be able to see that cub now, we would probably know for certain whether or not. And I've absolutely never heard of melanistic spotted hyena. So this would be a major first for me, and I must actually do some research into it and see how often it happens. Presumably it does, but it must be highly, highly unusual. No, it flies going. Monica, welcome to the Sunrise Safaris. I do hope you've been enjoying our live safaris over the last few days. And Monica, you would like to know if we get any ostrich in the area. And there are ostrich around. They tend to favor the more arid areas, so maybe sort of towards the north of Kruger. But they are in Kruger National Park. I have seen them. I have yet to see them while I've been working here on the Sabi Sands. I don't know, Andrew, have you ever seen them?
It's a negative.
Okay. So it's not really entirely the right kind of environment, or the right, what's the word I'm looking for? Not really the right kind of habitat for ostriches. But apparently the crew have seen them at Manuletti before, and obviously this whole area, thank you elephants by the way for that roadblock, this whole area is open and there's no fences stopping them from coming in. So it is a possibility. It's just because the landscape isn't quite right and the level of rainfall isn't quite right for what they are adapted for. They tend to be birds that are very, very well adapted towards arid, lacking in rainfall environments. So Monica, it's a possibility, but not something that's happened here yet. We always keep an eye out for them. They are fascinating birds, and I always keep an eye out for their track as well, which is a very bizarre sort of two-toed track with one very large toe and one tiny little toe. So interesting birds, and often a type of prey that's favored by cheetah, who are one of the only animals who are fast enough to catch them. I'm going to stop here just because I don't want this little female to do exactly what she just did. It's okay, little girl. Just since we were talking about territories, it's a nice example of a little animal with a tiny, tiny sort of football field sized territory that her and her mate will defend quite vigorously. And even though they do mate for life and they do move through the same tiny territory, typically they tend to prefer to spend the day with time apart. So they forage apart from each other, usually only 100 or 200 meters away from each other. So her male will probably be somewhere around here, unless she hasn't managed to snare one yet. And you can see how wonderfully well that camouflage works. All we can see at the moment is just that little ear and face nibbling away. I'll try and sneak forward, or if I can. Just trying to see where the clearest view might be. And right now, with her tail dropped down like that, she is very, very cryptically colored. And you can see how easy it would be for her to run and hide. Now underneath that tail she's got a very, very vivid white patch. And when steenboks startle and they run away, they lift up their tail and they expose that white patch, which immediately attracts your attention. So they'll bounce around while they're running away from a predator with that white flash very, very clear. And then all of a sudden they'll stop dead and drop their tails and disappear in the same way that she has now. And the predator's eye will have stayed focused on where they last saw that white patch, and then they can just use those split seconds advantage to escape from the predator, because they might just be a couple of meters to the left or to the right of where the predator last saw that flash. Let me try and shift forward because she has sort of disappeared into that block. One last view of what is a very, very pretty little antelope. And the dwarf antelope are fascinating because there are quite a few of them, all evolved to fill a very similar ecological niche. So in this area we've got the common or the grey duiker, and then we've got the little steenboks, and we've also got a very, very unusual antelope, and I have yet to see one here, although I did see them fairly regularly where I used to work. But probably the most uncommon mammal sighting to have around here, that's a tiny little antelope known as a Sharp's grijsbok. So they are around. I will be very, very excited when I do get to see one. I'm not sure if any of the Wild Earth viewers have yet managed to see them. I doubt it. They are very, very unusual in this area. But a fascinating group of antelope, because there are so many different species of dwarf antelope, and yet they all full, and they feed on a very similar diet. So they do a lot of browsing, sort of digging for forbs and roots, and eating little shoots of grass, so almost identical diets, almost identical environments, although the duiker maybe sometimes tend to favor the drainage lines just that little bit more, and yet they are completely separate species that do not interbreed with each other. So really interesting little things. And up towards the mountains, we might even start to see the red duiker, which is a slightly smaller, really pretty little antelope. And then the smallest member of that family, which is the blue duiker, is more towards the coastal forests, but really stunning little creature, probably only about this big in height. So really, really tiny, one of our smallest antelopes, and very sweet looking things, but exactly very similar niche, hiding away in thick vegetation and very secretive. Start to change, we're going to start to see a lot of the migrant bird species returning. And Lynn, you would like to know when the woodlands kingfisher will return to Djuma, and they're actually one of the latest migrant species to arrive. It will probably only be in around November, although you do occasionally get the odd bird who's mistimed it and come back a little bit earlier, but we will let you know. And we're going to very, very soon start to see some of the earliest returning migrants. So I know that James, I'm not sure if you're watching this morning, but James was wondering if the lesser striped swallows have come back, and I still haven't seen any yet, but I did see the red-chested swallow, so they are back. And we're going to, some of the other earlier migrants, we're actually going to start getting the Wilberg's eagles and the steppe eagles back again very, very soon, as well as the cuckoo species. We're going to start to hear them as they start calling for their breeding season.
Brian said he heard a woodlands kingfisher, but I'm not sure if he knows what the woodlands kingfisher sounds like, but he said he heard it.
I'm not sure about Brian's hearing of a woodlands kingfisher, but I know that Steph is currently listening to the various sounds around Twin Dams, so we're going to cut back across to him and see if we can hear anything, including possibly the mysterious early woodlands kingfisher.
Well, welcome back, and myself and Brian are sitting over here and just listening to the bush. We've got fresh leopard tracks moving into this area, male and female leopard tracks. There's a chance that they're mating. For us driving around, it will only help so much. By far and wide, the best thing to do is to just sit and listen, and so it's a good thing you're going to come and sit and join us while we listen to the bush around us. We're listening for that telltale growl and rumble of leopards that are mating. They're very similar to lions in that the female doesn't like to be covered, and quite often as soon as the male withdraws, the barbs at the end of his penis create seems like some pain, and the female quite often swats him with quite a loud roaring and growling that goes over, and it's telltale for this diagnostic sign out here. There, what you're looking at there is a virtual starling, one of the prettier birds that we have out here. Not migratory. I hear Jamie's been talking to you about migratory birds, with Andrew even claiming that he heard a woodlands kingfisher. Now for this time of the year, not likely. Oh, sorry, Brian, not Andrew claimed. Excuse me, my memory is being juggled today. Claimed you heard a woodlands kingfisher, which is probably true if it was somebody's ringtone on their mobile phone, but definitely not this time of year. They come mid to end of November, beginning of December is when the woodlands kingfishers return. This starling, however, is giving us a nice show. They're insectivorous birds, so he's looking for insects, termites, grasshoppers, even small mice and lizards. They'll take things like that even, using those long legs to outrun potential prey. You'll see that they pretty much go from dung pile to dung pile, lifting up the dung this time of the year to check what's underneath it. That beautiful sheen, that iridescence on their feathers comes from the fact that their feathers are actually black, completely saturated in melanin, but with a very thick keratin layer over the feathers, which give them that sheen as light is diffused through a clear keratin layer, very similar to your fingernails, only a lot clearer, on each filament of their feathers. And as it twists and turns, very similar to I suppose an old CD would diffuse light through the spectrum, so we're getting light diffusing through that spectrum before it's absorbed by the black feathers. Now, most of the starlings do not migrate, but one of my favorite starlings, the violet-backed starling, is also due back in the next couple of weeks. That is one of my favorite birds, let alone one of my favorite starlings. A beautifully colored bird. Brilliant males have brilliant white chests and a iridescent violet-red back. Not to say that these are not pretty birds. Disappearing behind the Land Rover. They'll probably come out around the side of the car here. But now, when leopard mate with one another or are mating with one another, this will happen every 5 to 15 minutes. So it works if you are waiting in an area for, say, 20 minutes. If they haven't done it then there's a good chance that they're not in this particular area. It doesn't say that they're not around, it just means that they're out of earshot of where we are at the moment. So we're going to give it another 5 minutes. That's a 20 minute that we've been waiting in this area. I haven't heard anything yet. There was some impala a bit earlier, drinking a bit earlier. But no other sign of anything. Sure you can hear and see the effect of the wind on some of these bushes and trees around. There's quite a stiff breeze blowing. I wouldn't say it's quite a gale just yet, but it's quite stiff and would definitely be hampering the ability for me to hear what's happening in any one direction. Especially with ears the size of mine, they tend to make quite a lot of disturbance, and sounds like jet airplanes in my head when the wind is blowing loud or hard. You can see the bush is nice and dry. Believe it or not, that in summertime every single one of the trees that you're looking at the moment will be green, covered in a thick, lush coat of leaves. The bush really does go through a dramatic change throughout the seasons, I must be honest. So we've got some oxpeckers that are busy calling in the distance. I just want to scan with my binoculars and see what it is. Oxpeckers are of course birds that are associated with any number of animal. This time of the day, coming down to drink, probably some kudu or some impala or a giraffe. I can't see anything just yet, although I can hear these oxpeckers. It'll be interesting to see what they are sitting on in actual fact. I can't see anything. They're not flying, they're definitely calling from a specific quadrant. Let's see what's happening here. And don't forget, you're welcome to send through some questions to me at the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or email questions@wildearth.tv, and we'll try and answer as many as we can while we can. So we have got some impala coming down to drink, which is what the oxpeckers were sitting on. And Edward has asked me a question. I don't have any flies on me now, Edward, which is except on the top of my head, which you can see. I can feel there's one there, maybe two. It seems to have flown away now. The wind has blown away them all at the moment. So the question is, do any of the flies that we have over here bite? Some of them do. They're not these little ones that are flying around me now. If you don't shush them off your face or off your hands, they have got a little bit of a sting to them. But nothing like the flies that you find further north of here. Nothing anywhere close to a tsetse fly, which feels like somebody has taken a dart and has thrown it into you. For those of you who have been lucky enough to travel to, not so much Botswana anymore, Botswana in the olden days, but some parts of Zimbabwe, definitely Zambia, and some parts of Namibia. I tell you, there are the tsetse flies that come and swarm you over there are something phenomenal. You build this twitch of smashing your face and smashing your legs. I've even seen pilots forget about what they're doing in a plane to smash a tsetse fly that was locked into the plane. Funnily enough, and luckily this wind seems to have calmed the flies down a little bit. When we were sitting with those Birmingham boys a little bit earlier this morning, there were around about 50 or 60 flies swarming around us, and they were driving us both inside, myself and Brian. Brian actually puts a mask up over his whole face. You can't see anything, just glasses and a buff over his face to stop the flies from bothering him, so that he doesn't shake the camera too much. But see, these impala are slowly making their way down this valley. I'm going to just reposition slightly so that we can get them coming down to drink. I think it'll be quite nice to watch them drink, and also give us a little bit more time. And I also see there's a brown-headed parrot that's flown into this tree over here, which might come down for a drink. Let's see what we can do. Some of the better grasses that we have over here are actually Oh, there we go. Brown-headed parrot. Another one of my favorite birds out here. We only get the brown-headed parrot here. As you go further north, you also get the Mayor's parrot, and then you start getting some lovebirds as well. But right here, we just get the brown-headed parrot, and a very cute parrot at that, I must be honest. Ah, there we go, down to the water. Awesome. They live in mated pairs with one another, monogamous pairs, a mate for life, and will almost copy one another in what they do. It's part of strengthening their bonds with one another, doing synchronized flying, synchronized calling. That's actually beautiful. Give you an idea of their size. They're about lovebird size. For those of you who have some pets, maybe a bit bigger than an average lovebird. And you sometimes see them in flocks, not really more than 10 birds at a time, nowhere near the lovebird flocks that you get in Africa or the budgerigar parrot flocks you get in Australia. While we're waiting for these leopards to make a noise and for these impala to make their way down this little drainage line and for some more birds to come about, I thought that I'd answer an earlier question from Blair in Canada, who wanted to know, with all the activity that we've seen in the last couple of days with the Birmingham boys, them killing a lioness, one of a lioness, we don't know which one at this point, but a lioness, with them roaring the way that they're roaring, scent marking the way that they're scent marking, and killing other lions' cubs, does this mean that they've managed to take over this area? Can we call it a pride takeover, or are we still in the process of taking it over? Blair, that's a very good question. Generally, I'd say that only when the dominant male lions have been run out of this area and you see the male lions mating with females, would I say that the process of the pride takeover being finished. So when you see those 5 Birmingham boys actually physically lying next to you and interacting on a social level with either the Styx lionesses or the Nkahumas, that is when I would say that this pride takeover has finally taken place and cemented with the fact that the females will allow the males to mate to them. But having said that, females can even hold off estrus for up to 100 days to allow other stronger males in the area from coming in. So I don't think that the saga's over just yet at all. I think that we have yet to see the end of all of this. But today's been a fantastic day for us. I mean, the wind is blowing. It's going to be an interesting afternoon, I think, and especially if the wind is blowing. We've had a good time, myself and Brian, and it's almost the time for us to say goodbye for the morning. We'll catch everybody again in the Sunset Drive, and you're going to go through to Jamie, who's going to say goodbye. We'll see you later.
So guys, welcome back, and for me a fairly unsuccessful morning spent tracking. I didn't manage to find my Nkuhuma pride. They crossed across our boundaries just before I could get there, and then that female leopard has pulled a little bit of a sneaky maneuver on me somewhere. I'm going to have to go back and see exactly where it was that she doubled back or what she did. She's disappeared off somewhere, but still an amazing morning and such a cool zebra sighting to get to see them interacting in that way with those young bachelors, just sparring a little bit with each other and demonstrating how well zebra interact and a little bit more about their dynamics. And Sibusiso, aka the Black Mamba, you were watching the show and wondering if, because zebras have such flexibility in their ears, can they move them around to indicate their mood in the same way that a domestic dog or some of your pet dogs might do? So when they lie with dogs, when they lie their ears flat, it means they're unhappy, they're slightly aggressive, or just feeling very uncomfortable. And yes, absolutely they do, in a way that very similar. Some of the viewers might have had quite a bit of interaction with horses and done horse riding. And in the same way that ears back for horses means they're in a bad mood, the same goes for the zebra. And that's why they've got that wonderful black across the back of the ears, and that applies for almost all animals. Those ears are so important in terms of indicating their mood and communicating that. Because just remember, the animals don't talk to each other in the same way that we can. They need to convey their communication in different ways. So the ears and the tail are probably the most important, as well as sort of the facial expression and the lips. So excellent question. Yes, they do. Ears flat back means aggression. Ears up and sort of pointed forward with a staring expression, that means that they're focused on something. And then with ears just flicking around from rotating side to side, they are nice and relaxed and just listening to what's happening around the area. So a very interesting few days in terms of lion dynamics, and we know that it has been a difficult few days for all of us and many of the viewers. The Nkuhuma pride have now moved away from the Birmingham boys, so we can rest easy about them for now. And before we close off, just a quick message to Emily Wallington. It is her birthday today, so very, very happy birthday from myself, Andrew, and the whole Wild Earth crew. We do hope that you're having an amazing day wherever you are, and have a fantastic, fantastic birthday. And just so that you know, Emily Wallington is Graham Wallington's wife, so one of the big bosses of the Wild Earth Company. So, as always, thank you for joining us on this wonderful sunrise safari. It is a very, very windy morning, which bodes well for the afternoon because it is great hunting weather. So Steph and myself will be out and about for the sunset safari. A big, big thank you to Andrew, and of course to Brian for his early woodlands kingfisher idea, which definitely isn't a possibility. Thank you to Tara and Jess in FC, and Eugene for all of his technical genius. Thank you to you, the viewers, and we will see you again for the sunset safari this evening. Cheers, guys.